Hello. Well, welcome back. I am a little bit late in making this video, and I am a little bit late even in posting it. I usually post these on Thursday morning, and I've usually recorded them at least a day or two in advance. And in fact, it is Thursday night when I'm actually filming, and it will be slightly later Thursday night when I post this. So I'm a little behind. And thank you for watching. If you've been here before, you know my name's Kara, and I use this channel to document a year-long low-buy project because that's helping me keep a tight budget, and that is helping me to pay off my student loans. And if you've been here recently, then you would know that in the month of September, I'm just telling slightly more personal stories about my life and kind of giving a deeper glimpse into who I am and what kinds of things I'm about. And part of why I'm doing this so late is that I was very undecided about doing this at all. And that is because I've decided, and like really decided in maybe the last 5 minutes, as perilous as that may be, I've decided that this one will be about my political views. And there's like no script and there's no list, and I'm probably gonna forget 100 things. And so this is kind of a very short and brief and very incomplete. I can't even emphasize how incomplete this will be. A very incomplete view into kind of my perspective. So I'm actually not even sure where to start, but I'd like to first say that I've changed. I've changed a couple of times that I can confidently talk about. I've changed in my political views. And so you should just know that people can change and that I have changed. And I sensed in my life swings in my political perspective. Sometimes they really change, and that my thoughts on an issue have completely changed compared to where my thoughts on that same issue were in the past. That is true and has happened. And also, there's also the phenomenon where I don't think I have changed, but I guess the labels that we tend to use or the political camps that we identify with have changed the terms of the conversation so that my label probably has changed where my position might not have. So all of that I just want to lay out there, and that's actually part of why I really want to express what I actually think, and I have deep hesitations about it because I might actually not be up on the latest. I might not be up on the latest terminology, and I might not be up on the latest labels, and so I'm a little bit afraid to use them because of what that might accidentally mean to you, my listener. So all that to say, and I just took a shower, so I'm trying to like let my hair dry and be a little bit more even, and that's going to change the light because the light's behind me, and well, gosh, real problems. Thanks for suffering with me. Yeah, so I have changed, and there's a few ways in which I've changed, and most recently I have changed, and it's several years in the making, but it doesn't feel like, well, so I have moved and my communities have changed in the last couple of years, and in the midst of, and before I moved away from my previous community, I was actually already feeling and thinking differently than that community seemed to think. And so moving away was easy in the sense that I didn't have to at least broach that change in myself with that community. I was able to quietly sort of like leave that community, and like there's no hard feelings involved in any of this, and there's no like deception. It's just that it was natural and easier to move and not disrupt that relationship right as I was also going to be departing. But I had changed, and it's part of, and I think many people who may have been in and out of several communities or moved from, one job to the next, or, if you're a teacher, maybe going from one school district to the next. But sometimes your own changes make moving easier, and sometimes it's a contributing factor, and sometimes it's just something that happened at the same time, and moving is kind of helpful to you personally, even though it isn't the initial reason why you moved. Anyway, I guess I should stop beating around the bush, right? Whatever. But just that people change and people's lives change, and it is nuanced and it's complicated. And above all, I have hesitated to talk a lot about how I have changed and how my views have changed because I don't get to have daily interactions with my friends who, when I last got to live and interact with them regularly, I agreed with them or I thought very similarly to them, and I still love them. And I still understand them and I still care about them. And I've changed a little bit, and it's so hard to then, when I'm now living in a place where I don't get to daily interact with them or very regularly interact with them, and when I do, it's mediated. And it's often mediated on social media, so it's not a private interaction. It's not intimate. I don't know how to broach the fact that I feel a little differently about certain issues, and I know that if I had the chance to sit with those friends quietly and away from social media, we would be able to have a wonderful conversation about what has started shaping my opinion and what I learned that changed my mind, and to give them the chance to actually respond. And I mean, for all I know, my friends have changed too. And I'd love to, away from the fury of social media, I would love to hear what their most recent understanding of themselves and of the world they have. So it kind of is all of that, and I would love to extend that to my friends. So yeah, like I just really do understand that people can change, and like the last iteration of your opinions that I got to hear isn't the final word on what your opinion is. And the same for mine. The last time you heard my opinion, that's not like the final word on what I'll ever think on that subject. But social media and putting those opinions out there in public is really hard to do well. So anyway, I've longed to and ached to talk about how I'm changing, but it's also so fearful because I don't get the chance now that I've moved away from a lot of my really good friendships. I've moved away from the opportunities for that kind of intimacy and privacy, really, where you have the chance to really share what you think and why without interruption and without sort of instant reactionary to every little part of it. It is what it is, and I'm sure you can relate. So yeah, stories in September on this channel, and today I dare to talk about stories of how I've changed in my views. And I haven't made a list for once of like the points that I should try to talk about. So I think I just kind of the basic movement in the last few years for me has been, this is really interesting because it's like the opposite of where I thought I would be. If you'd asked me 10 years ago, I've moved the other way compared to what I would have predicted for myself. So I have become socially more conservative, and I don't even think there's a way to say like economically. Yeah, no, I'm not economically less conservative. And this is where those labels are going to be less helpful. But let's say that in my 20s, I was all about individual freedom, and the more you could flout society's expectations and the more you could show that you had questioned norms, the better. And I actually still think that it's very important to question norms and to mind the fact that norms are hard on people who are near the edges and beyond the edges of what that norm is. And yet now I've also come to understand the value of norms. And I mean that in sort of the like scientific meaning of the word norms. Like norms are like there's no value judgment. There isn't a good or bad judgment on what is the norm. It's just that that is what most people as a category fall into, and it becomes a norm. Therefore, we call it normal. And things near the edges of that or beyond the edges of that we deem abnormal. I don't think there's anything wrong with being outside of the norm. And yet, being outside the norm is less common. And so while we need to protect people who experience their lives outside of norms, and we need to respect people who experience their lives outside of norms, at the same time, we cannot design society for them. So I'm actually not even sure where that puts me on any political spectrum. I feel very homeless. I don't want to vote for a Republican these days, and I don't want to vote for a Democrat these days. And there are like third-party candidates that are promising, and yet they still don't embody everything that I would want. And so I think I fall into a very large group of politically homeless people. Yeah. Politically homeless. And that's odd to me because when I was in college, I would have like fully embraced Democratic politics and thought they were the greatest. And I didn't know that much yet. And I also think that the Democratic Party has changed since then, the early 2000s. I think that the Democratic Party has changed a great deal. And that's one of those things where I don't think I moved, but the label moved and the categories have changed. Meanwhile, on some things, I have moved where, like I was talking about with these things that we would consider normal or abnormal, I used to really think that we should probably be designing the system for the abnormal. And how dare we design the system for the normal, and how oppressive. It's hard to even describe that mentality now because I've changed quite drastically, to where now, while I think it's important to have space and protection for people who experience their lives outside normal categories, because they are less common, we can't design everything for those outside and at the edges categories. I think it's really important that we can talk about it too, and name the fact that protection is important for minorities, and minority means like your weight doesn't always pull enough weight to make everything about you. Yeah. This is probably one of those videos that's just going to be a little bit sloppy and probably not say much of anything. But I waited too long. It's late at night. I'm tired after my work, and I thought I would be able to talk about something coherently. Who knows? Let's see. I'd love to give some concrete examples. I think for me, what changed me politically most recently, because I have actually changed politically, or the categories have shifted around me a couple of times in my life that are pretty distinct. But most recently, I find myself a little bit exasperated with the left in general. I find myself a little bit exasperated with them when I used to strongly identify as a progressive, a Democrat, a leftist, call it what it may have been called in like 2011, 2012. But I find myself now a little exasperated with that iteration of who I was, because I was always ready to look for systemic explanations and to blame systems for things that were hard in my life or were going wrong in my life. And nothing was helping my life in that vein. And what changed my life and helped me to actually feel empowered and actually exercise agency in my life were things like, I'm going to actually stop complaining about student loan debt, and I'm going to quit moaning and saying that the system is predatory, though it is. I'm going to quit waiting for a solution, although Elizabeth Warren and her paying off student loans thing looked pretty cool for a hot minute. I'm going to quit waiting on the system to get perfect. And that's the thing. I'm going to quit waiting for the system to be perfect. And I need to pay off my darn loans. And so there was sort of this mindset change in my personal approach to things. And it was so empowering to face the fact that I was the reason I was in debt, and I could actually deal with it. It was so empowering to look at, okay, I could stay in a career that is really, really hard on me personally, but has a decent salary. Or I might totally strike out in the money making, but I could go and do honest, basic labor and stock the shelves of your local natural food store, but have chosen it. And those choices, even though they are so-called downwardly mobile, and I'm blue collar now as opposed to white collar, it's just different. But having chosen all those things, I have so much more empowerment in my life that waiting around for some kind of progressive utopia that actually uses the word empowerment all the time, but heaven forbid if an individual takes action that is different than what that movement calls empowerment. I know that I'm probably not being completely clear, but when I took action in my life and had good results and felt empowered, I was doing exactly the opposite. I was doing exactly the opposite of what my, at that time, left-leaning and progressive perspective would have allowed. I do think that student loans have been a racket, and I do think that it is a predatory system that has taken advantage of generations. And that sucks. And of course, like, it'd be great if that system changed. However, I just, like, okay, so once you see that, yes, I would be the first to sign a petition to, like, end predatory student loans, and I would be the first one to sign a petition or a whatever to introduce a bill that says that maybe you can get rid of these in bankruptcy claims. But until that comes along viably, the only option is to knuckle down and face your debt and pay it off if you want to have a life. If you want to have a life, if you want to get on beyond this and do something else, you got to knuckle down and pay it. And so I changed because empowerment meant taking action. And I mean, if I finish paying off my debts and the very next month there's some grand government program that forgives every cent of student loans, I will still not regret having worked to pay them all off. I will not regret having worked to pay them all off. I will not feel like a fool. And you better believe I will have no respect. And this is the thing, I will have no respect for people who waited around for that loan forgiveness. It's a very weird change. But to take responsibility for the debt you put yourself in, and in student loans, this is kind of a unique situation. I realize there are all kinds of other debts that have different circumstances. And I will wait to speak so forcefully about those until I understand what they are. But for student loans, man, a lot of us should have seen through them. And unfortunately, like, there comes a point where you can't wallow and moan about how it's a predatory system. Like, I don't know, like, it's just like if if some animal were chewing on your leg, but you had the opportunity to kick them, wouldn't you kick them? Or just moan about them chewing on your leg? Like, no, kick them. So, I don't know. This video is going a lot of strange places I hadn't expected, but my politics have changed because of my personal experience, and I'm trying hard all the time to continue to hold myself knowing that my particular experience doesn't necessarily translate as a universal for everybody else. But I also know that always waiting for some universal, perfectly applicable to the entire whole picture, utopian vision, waiting for that before you do something particular is a recipe to waste your life. So if you're waiting for some kind of fix to come along for your problems, stop. And you have to just take a hold of your problems, however big they are. I mean, my debt was $95,000 a few years ago, and now it's under 35. If you have a gigantic problem, it sucks that you have a gigantic problem, but the fastest way out of it is for you to do things about it. Really. And like, I'm ready to link arms and fight for like a better student financial situation in this country. Absolutely. I'm ready to link arms about it. But until that's a real full-time big movement, which I don't see it happening, the fastest way out of your problem is for you to knuckle down and find your way out of your problem. It's certainly been the fastest way out for me. I think it's been exactly 3 years and a month. Yeah, it's been 3 years and a month, and I've gone from $95,000 of debt to under 35. And yeah, I'm not done yet, that's for sure. And I have chosen a path where I'm, you could say, downwardly mobile. You could say foolish, not making as much money as I should, blah, blah, blah. But I have chosen this path and I'm enjoying it, actually. And it's working. And if I need to make drastic changes because something changes, I can. But yeah, I've had sort of political changes or changes in my perspective on big problems for society because of the experience I've had with big problems personally. Trying to balance out the fact that my single experience doesn't necessarily translate to everybody's. But I think our personal experiences have something to say, and that's where I'm at these days. So I'm a little more conservative. I'm a little more leaning towards the side of take responsibility for your life and do what you need to do, even if the system is unjust, even if there's something unfair about it. Like, weren't we all told as children that life isn't fair? I was certainly told that life isn't fair, and now I experience that life isn't fair. Although, the funny thing is that, of course, my situation is entirely of my own making and is completely fair for me to have to face this. I took out all these loans. So, yeah, I've changed. I'm a little less patient with whining and moaning about how awful things are when I don't see somebody also taking action to do something about the problems that they are talking about. That's where I'm at. And gosh, we'll see what happens posting this. Thanks for listening. Yeah. Have a good night. I hope you're well wherever you are, and I'll see you in a week.